Welcome to Taste Buds. I'm Debra Eckerling, goal strategist, writer, and foodie. And today I'm speaking with Daphne Subar, founder of Subarzsweets. And any day, every day is a great day to talk about food, but we also get to talk about sweets. So, really happy to have you here and excited to get to know you.
Thank you, Deborah. I'm really excited to be here.
So, please share what is Subarzsweets? Let's start there.
So, Subar Sweets is an online bakery that I launched back in 2016. This is a second career. I launched in my 50s. Prior, I was a practicing attorney for 26 years. While practicing law, I was raising my three daughters. I love to bake, I love to cook, and I would always kind of be experimenting in the kitchen. And it was really my daughters who encouraged me to, or kind of almost challenged me to leave the practice of law and launch a bakery. And I came up with excuses, and it was really them pushing me and saying, well, that's not a real excuse. Like, why not? Why not? You tell us to try things and follow our passion. It's your turn. So, 2016, I launched Subar Sweets. As I said, it's an online bakery with a unique baked good, and we really specialize in gifting.
Oh, fun. So, people can buy it as a gift to themselves or to other people.
Exactly, exactly. And that's what happened. The first couple years, I realized a lot of people were buying them for themselves and then at the same time sending a gift because the way they're packaged, and we make that process really easy. So, yeah, people do it both ways.
Nice. And what is it about? I know we'll talk recipes later and you can't share this one, but what is it that makes your treats sweets so unique and awesome?
So when I launched, I wanted to come up with a unique, awesome treat, something different. So I took a couple traditional mandel bread recipes that I had been using that I had already experimented with because my oldest daughter had some severe food allergies. So I couldn't have any almond flour or crushed almonds or any nut in the product. So I basically took a mandel bread recipe, combined it with a cookie recipe. So it's a little bit sweeter and a little bit less hard. And then we came up with Subarz. We started with one flavor. It was traditional chocolate chip. And then we kind of had fun from there. We realized that it was a really big hit the way this product was, that rather than coming up with other baked goods, we would just experiment with flavors. So we have a chocolate almond, a peanut butter, a matcha, a lavender, like all sorts of really fun flavors. But they're all the same product that really is combining the crunch of a mandel bread with the sweetness and fun of a cookie.
And I love that you use the word fun. It's one of my favorite words because if you're doing anything, why not make it fun? And isn't fun like the opposite of being an attorney?
That's funny. I never thought about it that way. But yeah, I guess so. Although I did enjoy practicing law, I really did. And I probably could have kept doing it. It's just really that the girls challenged me. But it is really fun. It's fun to go in a kitchen and know, like we have Subarz that we originally released in June for Pride Month, way back when, I think our second year. And we do them for celebration. It was so much fun to be in a kitchen because there's a lot of like brightly colored sprinkles and chocolate chips and all sorts of treats in there. And it is fun to go in and experiment, and come up with four different versions and figure out what's going on. So it has been. There is a lot of fun involved, and if there wasn't fun, I wouldn't be doing it at this stage.
And you are not the first former attorney I have interviewed on Taste Buds with Deb. So also hilarious. And so let's talk mandel bread. That's like what that's like the ultimate Jewish cookie.
I agree.
D
I agree.
Why mandel bread? Why use
I
that as one of these elements?
I think only because I had made it a lot when my kids were little and they really enjoyed it. And if you bring it to someone's house, it was a little bit different. If they weren't familiar with mandel bread, they really enjoyed it. It's a little bit different than a biscotti, but similar. But so I kind of just took that recipe, and then I liked when I launched the business that I really kept mandel bread as part of the underlying idea because I did like mandel bread. I do feel like it's a little bit of a tribute to my heritage.
Do you remember your earliest food memory or bonus points if it involves mandel bread?
I don't remember my earliest food memory with mandel bread, but I do remember growing up a lot of food memories. My mom wasn't a fancy cook, but she cooked. We always had home cooked meals, and I remember just watching her in the kitchen and watching my grandmother and my aunt cook, and I really enjoyed watching them and learning from them.
Well, we met through our friend Katie Chen, who's been on the show, and I was just on her show and I talked about mandel bread. So, related, the universal mind, who knows? But for me that is one of those foods that if anybody mentions it, I think back to childhood for sure. So you've got this business and you love, has it always been like you loved baking? Is that where the dare or the challenge came from?
Yeah, so I loved baking also because I love eating. Like I really like sweets. So I kind of felt that I could justify it if I made it, then I kind of need to taste it and eat it. So I think that's where it really started. Um, my older daughter had the food allergies, so I always wanted to have something she could eat. And even when she got a little bit older and she would go, to all of her friends' bar and bat mitzvahs or birthday parties or anything, I always felt bad because she couldn't have a lot of the food because she just didn't know. And so I always wanted to make sure she had a little sweet thing at home. I guess I was thinking, gosh, I don't want any of my kids to be hungry for more than 10 seconds without there being like an option there. So that's kind of how the baking started. And then, I have three daughters, and one had some medical issues and she was on a restricted diet, and one was just picky. So it all started that way, that I was convinced that I could find something that they all liked. And actually, our traditional chocolate chip Subarz are based on a chocolate chip mandel bread recipe. And that was really their favorite. I mean, they liked that. And we knew that that could be made safe for all of them if we were invited to someone's house. And if someone's child also had a nut allergy, I always, that's something they could have had because of the way I changed the recipe.
Nice. So in finding something that benefits your daughter, you really created something that speak to a need, essentially. Don't you love it that treats are like a need? I
I
I
know. I love that you said that, actually.
So what can people do to put more fun in their cooking and their baking? Because I think we decided that is the essence of everything.
Yes, it is. I think, and it took me a while to get over this, but I think you just can't be scared. I mean, even if you make a mistake, it's probably gonna be edible. And just go in there and experiment with it. I mean, the only time I remember doing something was actually with my youngest daughter. It was a block party years ago, and they had a cupcake baking contest or something, and she was baking them, and she put salt instead of sugar. That was the only, so it was like a cup of salt. So it was like a lot, and then a teaspoon of sugar. So that's the only time I've ever had something go wrong, but that was fun and we still enjoyed the experience. But I think getting out of your own way, like if you're following a recipe and you don't have all the ingredients or you make a little mistake, just go with it. Usually it's fine. Actually, last night I was making something and I kind of messed it up. And my husband and my daughter were having it for dinner. I said, if you like this, that's great, but I don't actually know if I can make it again because I completely changed it as I was going through the recipe. But it was fun, and usually it comes out fine. So, yes, having fun and not feeling restricted by a recipe.
So how do you know if you can change a recipe? Is it just all trial and error?
It is a lot of trial and error, and it is knowing kind of what you can change a little bit. And sometimes, if I'm stumped, if I'm trying to make something and I realize, oh no, I forgot to buy pecans, let's say. You can go Google and say, making this, forgot the pecans, and they'll give you a substitute. Maybe a walnut is a good substitute, or maybe it'll say, don't use a walnut. It changes it. So there's a lot of times you can Google. Um, but fair, I mean, I'm not making like, let's say brisket and not using brisket. It may be like one of the things in the sauce that I'm changing. So, and it's just getting comfortable with it. And usually things can be doctored. But it really is, I guess you're right. I guess there is a comfort that you have to get used to on knowing that, yeah, you can change the spices a little bit. You can change the quantities of certain things. But if it's like a salad dressing, you still want to have, I always like citrus. So a little bit of lemon, a little bit of olive oil, certain seasonings, and then, a little bit of like agave or honey or something, or balsamic or something to give it the sweetness. So just kind of knowing that helps.
I love that you mentioned Googling because I know that sometimes if I'm cooking and I'm missing something, I will just say Alexa, what can I substitute for this? And then you can stay within cooking mode without having to stop and wipe your hands and type something. So
Exactly.
most people, I guess, are more prepared if they're doing a recipe. They actually take out the ingredients. Sometimes we just don't do that, right?
I don't do it. I don't do that a lot. Like last night I was making something and I thought for sure I had Italian seasoning and I must have just, it's always the spices. I must have just used it up and I didn't have it, but then I know it's in Italian seasoning. So, I threw in the basil and the oregano and all that. But um, yeah, I'm not very good at pulling everything out in advance either.
That's like also the opposite of being a lawyer, right? Don't you have to be prepared for everything?
Yeah, that's interesting. It is the opposite. And now when I'm baking for Subarz, I am prepared because everything is, because that's really a science and I need to have it exact. Um, so it's interesting that you say that because I wonder if I got more relaxed with my non-Subarz cooking and baking since I'm so regimented with the business. I don't know, but yeah, that is very different than being a lawyer.
I was gonna ask what skills that you think translated over, but you might have just answered that.
Yes. I mean, I think being organized, looking at a big picture, and so if I'd get a case and I kind of knew where I wanted to go, but then breaking it down into, okay, I want this to be the result. So I need to interview these individuals, ask these questions, prepare these motion like that. So I guess all those are skills. I never thought of that. That's a good question.
It's a good answer. Thank you. I know you had a recipe you wanted to share.
So I thought about this question a little bit because I knew you would ask because I've, listened to your podcast. Um, I'm going to share a brisket recipe. So this was a recipe that actually I got way back when in my early lawyering days from my assistant. She had given me a recipe. I still have it on a handwritten index card that I've now taped in a book. I've changed it a little bit because I tend to change things, but it's really based on this original recipe from my assistant in the 90s, I think, named Mary. And I've continued to make that brisket. Everyone seems to love the brisket. I asked my kids what's their favorite food that I make, and all of them came up with brisket, as did my sister. And the interesting thing is, I'm a vegetarian, so I'm still making brisket, but I don't eat the brisket. And I've tried to take that recipe and make a vegetarian slash vegan version using jackfruit and all that. It doesn't work. So if anyone's going to take that recipe and try to make it vegetarian, it's not going to work unless you know something I don't know. And if you succeed at that, please share it. But yeah, that's the brisket. I cook it for, every year in Rosh Hashanah, every year in Passover, and if we do any other holidays or any special occasions during the year. So probably four times a year, I make the brisket, and I make a lot of it, and people take it with them. They really seem to enjoy it.
And if you go to jewishjournal.com/podcast, you will get this recipe. And I will add, I did an article a few weeks ago where someone gave me a good jackfruit brisket recipe. So
Oh,
I will link to that as well and send it to you. I am not a vegetarian. Does like the healthiness balance the sweet tooth, do you think?
no, not really. And honestly, my sweet tooth, since I've launched Subarz, I think because I'm around sweet so much, is actually turned more into a salt tooth. So I can have, a couple hundred Subars in front of me and I won't really feel that tempted. But if there's a big bag of chips next to them, it's the chips that are going to be calling my name, not the sweets a lot of times.
I love the salt tooth. I've never heard that before. So
Yeah, I think I just made that up. I had never heard it either. I felt like there must be a more glamorous or sophisticated way to say it. But I mean, I guess it does kind of. And also because if you're eating a lighter vegetarian meal, I feel like you sometimes feel like you're not going to be overwhelmed if you eat a sweet dessert. And if it's soup bars, they're actually not. They're like almost 3 bites each. They're not really large, so they really are a good light sweet treat to have after either a big meal or a lighter meal. But if you're going for like a piece of cake or something heavier for dessert, um, Yeah, maybe I do feel like I can justify it a little bit more if I've had a lighter vegetarian meal.
We get to make up any words we want and we get to make all the rules because we are food people and that's just the way we roll, right?
Exactly. I love that. I'm going to keep that in mind when I keep making up these rules. I call they used to be justifications, now they're rules.
And so my other life, which as goal strategist, which I introed myself with, it's really all about living that wonderful, fulfilling life that you want. So I love that you went from a life that you loved to another life that you loved. And usually it's just someone seeking something else. So I really like that it is almost like a different adventure for you, right?
There, and it's very different. And I honestly, in looking back, I didn't know how much I didn't know, but it's a very different adventure. I mean, I liked law. There was a lot of things I liked. I didn't think I ever wanted to have my own business. I liked that I worked for law firms. I didn't have to worry about the big picture, kind of, I did my little thing. Having your own business, you have to worry about everything. But it's actually been great, and it's been great to learn things. I've met so many other business owners that have amazing stories that I never really thought about. And I probably wouldn't have had the time to hear their stories and get to know them if I was still practicing law, because you're kind of just going, you're just, I don't know, I feel like it's a more rushed, more, I don't know, something about the way the day goes. You don't have time to stop and really get to know people. And that's really a benefit that I've enjoyed from having my own business and working with my clients.
Nice. Is there something you know now that you wish you knew before you started this business?
There's a lot. There's a lot of little things about running a business and marketing and networking, but I think the biggest thing I know now is it's never too late to try something new, and you really can. I mean, I left, as I said, in my 50s from the practice of law, launching a business, a food-based business of which I knew nothing about. I knew how to feed my family and friends. I had no idea how to scale and how to run a business. And you can learn it. And so I think that really was the biggest lesson is there's if you have a dream or a passion, try it because you can probably get some form of that and you can do it, which has been really fulfilling.
Were there any clues in your Jewish upbringing or otherwise that maybe you could have foreshadowed that you would dive into food someday?
I mean, food was always a part of my family. Like we always did family dinners during the week. And on the weekends, we always met with my first cousins and had dinner together every weekend. I mean, they were like siblings to me and with my grandmother. So food was always involved. Um, so maybe in that regard, but I'd never thought about it. Looking back, I realize now that my parents were both entrepreneurs, they were immigrants, and my sister started on business. So I feel like there was a lot of that in my upbringing that I never really acknowledged until just a couple of years ago when I looked more at why I'm doing this and why I'm finding myself so fulfilled. And I realized, oh wow, that really is from my parents and my sister.
So nature and nurture. I think what I'm enjoying so much about your story, and again, it taps into the other me, which is anytime you choose something new, whether it's going to be a little part of your life or a big part of your life, why not dive in? Because you do not know what riches will come from it.
Exactly. Exactly. I had no idea. I really had no idea. And when I started this, honestly, I thought it was a bakery because I had a baked good. And then I realized a year or 2 into the business that people were really enjoying them as gifts because they just make a great gift. And that's when I thought of myself as a gifting business, and that's been lovely. I get to work with clients and deal with all their corporate gifting. During the pandemic, I helped people stay connected with their family. I mean, the gifts that I have received by just running this business have been amazing, and I would have never missed them because I wouldn't have known they existed if I stayed on my original path, but having them now, it's really been amazing.
Food is the ultimate connector. What a wonderful conversation. Thank you, Daphne, for sharing your love of sweets and cooking and playing in the kitchen. Where can people learn more about you and Subar's sweets and everything?
We're on all social media platforms at Subarz, Subarz. Also, there's a lot more information on our website, www.subarz, Subarzsweets.com.
Thank you for joining me for this fabulous conversation. Thank you for tuning in to Taste Buds with Deb. Don't miss an episode. You can subscribe on YouTube, iTunes, and or your favorite podcast platform. And you can go to jewishjournal.com/podcast to read the articles and get the recipes that go with each episode. And you can learn more at tastebudswithdeb.com. Play with your food. Enjoy your sweet treats. You deserve it. Until next time, bon appetit.